So today's presentation is doing business with Department of the Navy. This training is part of our Diversifying Your Portfolio series. Now, an example of a benefit of diversifying your portfolio is having a diversified customer base. It may protect your business when there is a shift in the market. During these sessions, the Department of Veteran Affairs Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization introduces the small business community to potential buyers and potential partners so that you can learn about how to do business with them. During today's session, we will introduce you to the Office of Naval Research. During our previous session back in November, we introduced the community to the Marine Corps Systems Command. If you were unable to attend and are interested in the information provided during that session, please visit our YouTube channel to watch the recording. Today, we are joined by Mr. Bradley Taylor and Ms. Ellen Simonoff. Mr. Taylor is currently the Assistant Director for the Secretary of Navy's Office of Small Business Programs, which is located in Washington, D.C. He works to foster industry innovation, technology development, and the acquisition of quality products, services, and solutions to support the needs of our sailors and Marines. He also serves as the Navy Subcontracting Program Manager and is the Small Business Program Advisor to the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Procurement. He began his federal career as a licensed civil service mariner with the Military Sea Lift Command in 1978, and later transferred to a shoreside position in MSC's Tanker Operations Division, where he was responsible for vessel operations in support of Department of Defense petroleum requirements and Department of Energy Strategic Petroleum Reserves. Having received numerous awards throughout his career, the most notable occurred in April of 2013 when the Secretary of Navy presented Mr. Taylor with the Navy Meritorious Civilian Service Award for supporting the mission of the Military Sea Lift Command and for shaping MSC's small business program into an award-winning and highly respectable model program. He was previously recognized by the Secretary of Navy when he received the Navy Unit Commendation Award for his efforts during Operation Desert Storm for helping to deliver 76 million square feet of combat vehicles, supplies, and ammunition, and more than 7 billion gallons of fuel to U.S. and coalition warfighters involved in the global war on terrorism. Mr. Taylor earned a bachelor's degree from the State University of New York Maritime College and sailed as a USCG licensed officer in the Merchant Marine. He's also an ordained permanent deacon in the Catholic Diocese of Wilmington, Delaware. Ms. Ellen Simonoff has over 35 years of pre-award acquisition experience with both the federal government and private industry. She started her career working as a marketing manager and then marketing director for a very small company that was in the business of competitor intelligence. That experience still resonates with her today as she works with the small business community, helping businesses to do business with the Navy and specifically with the Office of Naval Research. Ms. Simonoff started her career in public service as a contract specialist at the Naval Air Systems Command. She then worked as a contract specialist with the Marine Corps Direct Reporting Program Manager, Advanced Amphibious Assault Vehicle, and Marine Corps Systems Command. She then became a warranted contracting officer and worked for the Defense Information Systems Command, Department of Energy, Marine Corps Installation, and Logistics Command, and Office of Naval Research. For the last 2 years, she's been the Office of Naval Research Director of Small Business. She's dually Level 3 certified in the Federal Acquisition Certification and Contracting Program for Federal Civilian Contracting Officers and Defense Acquisition Workforce Improvement Act for Defense Contracting Officers. She also holds a Defense Acquisition Accreditation in Small Business. And in her spare time, you will find Ms. Simonoff at the duplicate bridge table trying to earn master points. I will now turn it over to Mr. Bradley to briefly speak about the Office of Small Business Programs.
First of all, I welcome everybody. And Ellen, it's really a pleasure to have you speak today. The diversity is so critical. I always get Ellen's last name mixed up for what I had for lunch this afternoon, Smirnoff, but it's Simonoff. So sorry, Ellen. And with all of the experience that she brings to the Office of Small Business Programs, it's a tremendous resource. It's just unfortunate that she couldn't keep a job. Uh,
Thanks, Brad. I always enjoy tag teaming
yeah.
with you. This time,
Now,
I'm
I'm,
very
I'm sure that
excited.
I'm sure nobody's given you that introduction before. As you can imagine, the Department of the Navy, we buy everything from nuts to bolts to pencils, and to aircraft carriers, submarines, to um, uh, combat vehicles. And understanding what we buy, we have 10 different major buying commands in the Navy. And to do business with the Navy, you have to understand what each organization buys. You have to understand the differences between, say, the Navy and Marine Corps, and but then you also should understand the differences between the services, between the Army and the Navy and Air Force, etc. Uh, we have common terminology, but it means a lot different things mean different things. And that's why diversity, speaking of diversity and trying to understand how you can plug in to what we are buying is so critical. For instance, let me talk about just 3 seconds here on understanding the language. Take the phrase, for example, secure the building. If you say secure the building to the Marine Corps, that means go on in and kill everybody inside the building. If you say secure the building to the Army, they will go on out and they will secure the four corners of the building. If you say secure the building to the Navy, that means as you're leaving the building, shut the lights off. And for the Air Force, it means enter into a 5-year lease. So you have to understand that we all speak different things. So understanding the types of businesses that you may be dealing with, I highly recommend that if you're interested in doing business with the Navy, that you contact one of the Navy's directors of small business programs, or small business specialists, or program professionals, as we call them now, and learn more about the organization. And then when you're marketing to us, let us know how you can plug into what we are buying. When you're not hearing me talk about percentages and goals and all of that, quite honestly, I see that as the results of our efforts. We are more concerned about uh, looking for firms that are capable of supporting our mission, that you're going to plug in and you're going to provide a value added. And it's not that we are looking at trying to get a certain number of 8As or service disabled vets, et cetera, et cetera. All of that plugs in and helps us achieve the goals that we're achieving based on our acquisition strategy. Now, with that said, Ellen, I'm going to turn it over to you now, because Ellen brings a very unique a mix of experiences. And O&R, dealing with the Office of Naval Research, obviously research is critical to what we're doing, and we have you know, there's many different programs in the Office of Naval Research to help businesses, anywhere from the Small Business Innovation Research to what we call Naval X, to other sorts of research efforts. So, Ellen, thank you very much for letting me poke a little fun at you, and you know I love you. So here we go. Go ahead.
Thanks, Brad. This is the cover slide for my presentation. Um, it's titled the Naval Research Enterprise because the Office of Naval Research, or commonly known as ONR, actually has three smaller actually one is larger, of subordinate commands reporting to the Office of Naval Research, which is headed by the Chief of Naval Research. So if you've heard of the U.S. Naval Research Laboratory, that's part of the Naval Research Enterprise, as is ONR Global, Naval X, and PMR 51. Most of my presentation will be about ONR. Occasionally, I'll be talking about ONR and NRL because we are the two largest arms of ONR in terms of buying things through contracts. Actually, I'm going to skip to the very bottom of the slide where you have my name and email address. Take a second, or when you get the slide deck, to copy that down, because if my presentation was interesting and appropriate to what you would like to be selling to the Navy and the Office of Naval Research, send me a quick email with your email address, and hopefully you have a capability statement, and I'll add you to the ONR Small Business Distribution list.
Hi, Ellen. I'm sorry to interrupt. Your audio is kind of low. Some people are not able to hear you.
Okay, I'll try and speak louder. My voice is, I don't have a high voice, and I don't usually use my home computer setup with my home microphone and speak on that. So I will try and do my best to be loud. The big takeaway for slide number 1 is take down my email address in case my presentation is interesting and you want to be on the ONR Small Business Distribution list, email list. Send me your capability statement and we'll get you set up. Next slide. So for slides 2 through 14, we're going to go quickly through these to give you a quick summary of what ONR is about, our mission, and how we're organized. Next slide. So for us, we're all about science and technology, pretty much basic research. We're procuring things and also we have a great grant portfolio where it's about gaining knowledge for the future Navy and Marine Corps. We support the Marine Corps and the Navy in terms of the science and technology mission. Next slide. So I got these slides. We have a kind of a standard slide deck. So you'll see the very interesting and colorful slides, and then you'll get to the ones I made up for this presentation, and those will be essentially black and white. Keep going. Next slide. So ONR was established by Congress in 1946 to plan, foster, and encourage scientific research in recognition of its paramount importance as related to the maintenance of future naval power and the preservation of national security. In order for the United States to be safe, it's very important for us to have a very strong Navy. And we're looking at how do we continue our strength today and tomorrow. Next slide. So this slide represents the various aspects of the Naval Research Enterprise. The laboratory, Naval Research Laboratory, was actually established in 1923. ONR came along 20 years later in 1946 and now has the lab reporting to the Office of Naval Research. So Naval Research Lab, they are an actual lab in the DC area with several thousand employees, scientists doing hands-on research. The Office of Naval Research, we're physically located in Arlington, Virginia, in an office building, and we're buying research. Most of the research, well, I guess 1974, that's when ONR Global was established. and ONR now has presence around the world besides Tokyo. The chart designates 1993 as being important, and it says we're a 6.1 to 6.3 organization. That's talking about the funds that we spend are, or I should say we invest, are mostly very, very basic research. And we have another slide that covers that more in depth. More recently, Naval X has joined our organization, and that's towards towards the 75th anniversary. They'll cut off on my screen. Next slide. So where I said that ONR is a 6.1 to 6.3 investment or Navy investment organization, that means we're conducting basic research, which is mostly grants. We're using what's called when you're talking DoD, the color of money is important. So we're talking science and technology, a designation of a very low level basic research. And that's most of those contracts or grants are lit with our university and nonprofit community, where the major universities do a lot of research with what are called private primary investigators, along with graduate and non-graduate students. The 6.2 money is starting to get outside the area of basic research, and then we move over to advanced technology development, where we're still talking very, very basic, where we're talking maybe a very simple prototype being developed to show that something can work. So when you look at our portfolio of how we spend our money, about 80% of it is in those areas. Next slide. So ONR is divided up into 5 different departments, and the next 5 slides will give you a sense of what we're investing in, what those departments are doing. Next slide. So our Code 31 is our command and control communications, computers, cyber intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and targeting. I guess C4, I guess it's now C5I SR, and we're targeting fits into that. But these are, and then the circle gives you some of the specific areas that Code 31 is interested and has that responsibility across the Navy and the Marine Corps. Next slide. Code 32 is ocean battle space sensing, and this is where most of the underwater investments happen within ONR, whether it's marine mammals and biology, or putting sensors down, understanding our oceans, which take up a lot more of the earth. There's a lot more ground underwater than above water. And of course, we're the Navy, so we are interested in that water. Next slide. Code 33, their main interest is sea warfare and weapons. And the slide gives you some of the areas that they're working in. Next slide. Code 34 is the human element, warfighter performance. We also, besides doing medical in terms of physical, they also work on the mental health areas of warfighter performance. Very, very interesting portfolio. Next slide. And Code 35, we're working in the area of larger systems. So that's where they're funding future aircraft and engines, some of the energy related things that are being developed. For a long time, ONR was working on something called railgun. There's also a lot of high power microwave weapons. And I guess hypersonics and laser are also very large projects that Code 35 is interested in and they fund. Next slide. This chart kind of gives you what the organizational structure of ONR is, how it's set up. The bottom row provides for those. It is really what our mission is about. Most everything else is in support of that. So you have those 5 departments that we went over very, very briefly. Next slide. Okay, here we get to the Ellen slides, which are a little less interesting, a little less graphically pleasing. Last time I gave a presentation with Brad, it was all black and white, so this is an improvement. So I look at when you're talking about wanting to do business with ONR, that we have 2 streams of contracts. Science and technology, which has to do with our mission, and we kind of went over briefly in the prior slides what types of technology we're investing in. To get a contract award with ONR in the science and technology area, you would have to look up our funding opportunities, and most of those are broad agencies announcements, and that gives you the business process for how we select proposals to fund. What we're interested in funding, to get a very specific breakdown of that, you would need to check out the ONR research portfolio. So these are both web links that you can find from the ONR homepage, or you can always email me and I'll provide that information back to you. So for the research portfolio, you'll when you go online and look at that from our homepage, you will see that there is at least one program officer associated with each of the very specific things that we're indicating that we're interested in funding. We encourage folks that before you spend a lot of time, energy, and money putting together a proposal for ONR, that you actually make contact with our program officers and speak with them about what your capabilities are relating to science and technology and how you would like ONR to fund you, and see if it matches what we're saying we're interested in funding. So you look to find that fit, you talk with the program officer, you probably submit a very short white paper, and then if they're still interested, you'll talk with them about submitting a research and technology proposal. The other stream of contracts that ONR is letting is our support service contracts. And those are the contracts that almost augment the personnel working at ONR and helping each of the various parts of ONR get their responsibilities done. So all the different departments have a program office that's providing some engineering services and some general support to them. And then each of the, well, I'll say overhead or other departments usually also is having some support done. So those support service contracts are mostly small business set-asides, and they mostly use the Navy's Seaport Multiple Award Contract, a huge IDIQ in terms of conducting market research and in terms of releasing an actual RFP for it. ONR has a long-range acquisition forecast that I try to update 2 or 3 times a year. That's where you'll find out about our support service requirements that we renew or recompete approximately every 5 years. I'm working now on an update that will provide some additional information on all of those. So look for the long-range acquisition forecast under small business at ONR. You'll see that until I update it, you'll see some have already been recompeted. But at ONR, if we've been buying an area of support services, we tend to do it again. We tend to conduct market research to determine how it should be set aside for small business. So that's an interesting place to look if your area is support services versus science and technology contracts. Let's go to the next page. This slide gives you the top 5 areas that ONR and NRL combined are investing their money in. So you can see that it's over $1 billion for R&D. And then it skips down to professional and engineering services. That number, that fourth one, 541330, is mostly seaport buys. And then NRL is buying a lot of analytical laboratory instruments. Since they are a laboratory, you won't find those sorts of requirements being purchased by ONR. But there is a lot of similarity between the top 4 categories, and that again is where you'll find most of our money. This data was pulled from FPDS, so when it has total actions, a lot of the contracts are incrementally funded. It doesn't represent the number of contracts, just how many times something was done on these contracts. So the big takeaways are kind of the percentage of total actions, the dollars, and what the percentage of dollars are for each category. Next slide. This I pulled out of the federal procurement data system. I was, is ONR buying from veteran-owned small business? The answer is yes. And this is a sampling, well, this is actually our top veteran awarded contracts for fiscal year 22, which just ended, for ONR and NRL, that were awarded to veteran organizations, veteran businesses. And there's a very short description of what ONR or NRL was buying under each contract. And there's a wide variety of things. And you'll see that some of those are support services, some of that is engineering, and some of it is science and technology, where the veteran businesses are directly supporting ONR's mission. Next slide. I know that Brad said don't pay attention to our small business goals and performances, but so many small businesses ask me what our goals are for each year and how we're doing. So the smaller number under within each of the circles is ONR's goals for the various small business categories that are tracked each year: small business, small disadvantaged business, service disabled, veteran owned, women owned, and hub zone. So the smaller percentage in the smaller percentage in each of the circles is what ONR's goals are, and then the top larger number is how we were doing towards those goals as of 30 November 2022, 2 months into the fiscal year during a continuing resolution. So essentially,
Can I just add to that also here for just a second? ONR pays particular attention to program management, and so in doing so, their numbers are tracking above. They're being very successful in achieving their goals, except for Hub Zone. And everybody's got an issue with Hub Zone. It's just kind of the nature. We are trying to find better ways to boost that performance. Navy-wide, we're doing fine, but this is with ONR. It's a difficult. Hub zones are very difficult to deal with. Let me just also add to one comment here on the veteran-owned. Veteran-owned is great. The problem is it doesn't give you any preference, and it's just something that's tracked. Service disabled vet will get you a preference in the acquisitions and something that we can set aside. I've been doing this for 45 years, and the problem that I have found, and especially speaking with the different vets, is that, and understandably, nobody really wants to be called or considered service disabled. And we find this particularly true with the Marines, and it's unfortunate because nowhere else can you get the background and the technical acumen that you can than when you're dealing with the Navy, or I'm sorry, dealing with the services. And I have preference for the Navy myself, but that's okay. But that said, we should be supporting the vets wherever we can possibly support them. And we need to find out and have these, we need to have these discussions with the vets to find out, is there any preference program that they can get into that is going to help them get into the door. I always see the socioeconomic different categories as tools in the toolbox. If we want to get to you, it's difficult to get to you without utilizing some of these tools. So I highly recommend that you pursue some of these as to the greatest extent possible, because it will help you gain a little bit of a competitive edge. Also, what's really critical is that you respond to the requests for information, RFIs, or you attend industry days, and that you also make yourselves known to our small business professionals. Because without your input, we cannot adequately develop an acquisition strategy to set procurements aside. Right now, the Small Business Administration and the different services, DoD, Office of Small Business Programs, is very keen at trying to look at procurements that have traditionally gone to other than small businesses and see what portions of those requirements we can break out for small. For the first time, we have a Secretary of the Navy that happens to have been a small business owner. And when my boss went on in to brief him, and my boss says, we're doing really great. And the secretary says, I don't know that that's true. That makes kind of an uncomfortable moment. And I've sat in several meetings now with acquisition professionals and three-star admirals with the secretary. And to see these guys squirm, I wish that I was able to sell tickets. It's really great to just see leadership, senior leadership, give a real emphasis on small business. So kudos to O&R for hitting these goals. And as I said, it's because of efficient and effective program management. Go ahead, Ellen.
So this is also time for my commercial to remind you, and then someone just sent a message that they had sent in a capability statement. What do I do with those capability statements? I'm going to post them internally, so if someone's doing some market research, they can check out your capability statement. I will also, if I see something of interest to my community, I will send out an email blast. It could be something like the Defense Acquisition University is giving a talk on what Ukraine needs. It's not about O&R, it's what Ukraine needs today, but I sent that out because I thought that would be of interest to the folks that might be on my distribution list. I'm also using the distribution list so that when O&R releases a new requirement, I'm sending that out to my list. And my list is mostly small business. So I'm hoping that there will be a later effect where instead of the hard work of folks always looking for where things tie in, what they're selling, that I'm actually pushing out to the mailing list what we're looking for. Um, it's really hard being a contractor. It's really hard being a Navy or Marine Corps contractor. You have 10 larger buying commands and a lot of subcommands. And all their stuff is different places. What you contract opportunities, it doesn't push information out. You have to be constantly looking at it. So I'm trying to turn things around here, at least with ONR, to start pushing out to you what we're interested in investing our funds in. And, we'll see if it works. We'll see if we get some positive feedback that, gosh, I wouldn't have known about that opportunity. I put in a white paper and a proposal, and I won a contract from ONR. And that's what my goal is. I may never hear about it, but if I'm out there talking to the organizations that want to do business with ONR, I feel I have an obligation to try and share with you what our requirements are as I find out about them. Now, it is tough. I mean, it's like pulling teeth trying to get our contracting officers to tell me what RFP they're going to be sending out. As much as they're supposed to be proponents of competition, they don't want too much competition because it slows down the business of effectively awarding contracts. But I'll get off of that and we'll go on to my last slide.
One more thing here, Ellen. There are several comments that it's difficult to get into the federal space. It's how do you get work? I mean, there's one that what was it? It was how can we get involved and do business with us? Let me put it this way. Our job, our mission is to maximize opportunities for small business. Our mission is not necessarily, it's kind of we hope that it's a side effect, but our mission is not business development. That is the mission of the Small Business Administration. All of that said, you guys, industry, are the experts. Where you think that you can do work for us, that is going to require you to do your homework so that you are prepared to come to the director of small business. You don't have to go to contracting people and all of that. You go to the director of small business. That individual in each of the commands and throughout the federal government is not influenced by the requirements people or influenced by contracting. That person is responsible directly to the head of the organization. That individual, if they know of you when they're reviewing the acquisitions and they're developing these acquisitions early on, and a strategy comes across their desk that is cutting small business out, they now have some facts to go and say, okay, this is what it is. We do have small businesses that can perform. Now, we don't know. There's that rule of two out there. Two or more small businesses capable of performing, yada, yada, yada. We don't know necessarily that, if you come in and you're a one-off, and this has happened many, many different times, especially with service disabled, because we don't have other service disabled that are out there. And that makes it very difficult. And this is where you can help us, where it's like bring a buddy, bring a competitor or something into an acquisition so that we do have the data, we do have the ability to set something aside for a particular group. But again, we're not working just because somebody's a small business. That's not our job to try to single you out to meet a goal. Our job is to give you the information that you need, give you the resources that you can go to better understand what we are buying, And then it's your responsibility to tell us, hey, listen, this is, I do this, I do circuitry, I do blah, blah, blah. And this is why you should be paying attention to me. This is why I would provide a value added to your requirements, whether it be cost, whether it be something unique. The other difference here with O&R, and before you go to the next slide, Ellen, would you just talk about Naval X for a second and touch on SBIR? And if you need me to chime in, I'd be happy to.
Come on, Brad, you're going to chime in whether I ask for your help or not.
That's very
Okay.
true.
Okay, so all the large buying activities throughout the federal government have a very robust SBIR, STTR program. And those are set-asides to small businesses and set-asides to small businesses doing work with universities. At ONR, we're fortunate that the Navy program manager for the SBIR STTR program sits at ONR. That they're within our reporting chain. So this is a unique opportunity if you're working in the science and technology area and you have a product or want to work on developing a product that can be sold to the federal government. These are set-asides that are for small business, whereas the ONR science and technology requirements that we're investing in through our broad agencies announcements are not set-asides. So you are competing with all sorts of businesses, but it's all about the idea you have for ONR and how well you can convince us that your idea is doable and you have the resources to fulfill your contract obligations. Meaning we're interested in knowledge. We provide money through a contract so that you can work in that area, but do you have the resources to work on the contract? That's something we're interested in. So that just trying to compare and contrast the SBIR program from the ONR Broad Agency announcement, since both work in the science and technology research area. In addition, Naval X, they've been around now for a couple of years, and and they recently became their own command. Don't know if you knew that tidbit, Brad, but they're working with locally around the U.S. with small businesses in terms of working with the various smaller entities, a lot of the labs and whatever, to bring new product ideas into the Navy. Brad, your turn to add on to that.
Yeah, the innovation comes from small businesses, and this is where it's your time to shine. And Wendy, I saw your comment there. Yes, this all does happen in market research. Once the RFP is out, that's kind of it. You're too late. The train has left the station in many cases. But it's very important that you understand who to contact. As I said, contact the director of small business for the Navy. If you go to the Navy site that I put the link up there, just Google Navy small business, you'll get there. There's the commands tab that lists all of our commands. Somebody was wondering about architectural services. It depends on the types of architectural services. If it's, for a building, that would be through NAVFAC. If it's for ships, that would be through Naval Sea Systems Command or the Military Sealift Command. Then there's also a tab there doing business with the Navy. And there's links in there dealing with, that speak more on the topics that are available for under the Small Business Innovation Research. These are all different areas. There's also the Mentor Protege program. The Mentor Protege program for DoD is not like the SBA. It can be a reimbursable program but but it's not for the small businesses to come to the Navy or to DoD. It's for other than small business mentor that is going to um, transfer a certain amount of technology to that small business that help them develop. And so generally a small business that wants to be a protege already has a relationship with the other than small business. And at that point, they then come to the Navy to present their proposal for a mentor-protege agreement.
Hey, Brad,
Yes,
let's get to the last slide, because that's where I was gonna
Yep.
save some time for some questions. 'Cause
Roger.
A lot of them are coming in.
Go
I
ahead.
have to say that if anyone emails me and they need help navigating this federal government, Navy, DoD, how to get to the right point of contact, I'll try and help you. I'll ask you to do some homework, and then we'll chat about where your needs are, and I'll try to redirect you as Brad was talking about. But let's get to the questions, because we can't Brad, you and I can't anticipate what they want to know. So Wendy, this is my last slide. I'm hoping we can spend the next 15 minutes on questions and answers.
Yes. Okay, so there was one question. So I just summarized it and they asked, are you able to elaborate why you feel that hub zones are difficult to work with?
Oh,
It's not that the companies are difficult to work with. The issue is it's hard to maintain a hub zone, and the hub zone type companies don't always fit in with the ONR portfolio.
let me also add to that, because exactly, it's not the hub zone, the firms that are difficult. Part of the problem with dealing with the hub zone, dealing with hub zones is that as a company becomes more successful, you lose that number of employees that you need to have to keep that hub zone going. There's also dumb regulations that if you change your address, for instance, to the second floor of a building, this was a big court case at one time, that firm was no longer a hub zone. So it's very difficult to first of all, we can get hub zones generally one-off on different one-off procurements, but getting competitive hub zones is very difficult. And so that's where we need to enter into these conversations further. If you're interested in how can you work with this particular socioeconomic preference, how can you utilize that within the different buying commands, not to achieve a goal, but is that a tool that can help meet a requirement?
We have another question. Are there any set-aside contracts anticipated for 8A certified companies? If so, who would be my point of contact?
Okay, for ONR, for our support service requirements, those are mostly going to be competed through Seaport. And if the dollar value is more than the 8A threshold, is that now 4 million, Brad?
Yeah, I believe so.
It will be competed amongst Seaport. Right now, we have our largest IT requirement being competed amongst 8A on Seaport. We're in the evaluating the proposal phase right now. I know we're in year, I think, 3 of our support service contract for the contracting community. That has been done as an 8A competition in the past. And of course, you know the rule. Once 8A, it tends to stay in the 8A program. Check out the long range acquisition forecast, and it will pretty much tell you what how the last requirement was done. So you'll want to look for the 8A buys because those are likely to stay within the program. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Ellen. Another one, are there any transportation needs in your space?
Not at O&R. We're not buying transportation unless we're buying something that goes with an experiment that we're doing. I would think that NRL might be buying more transportation being a Navy base. And you can drop me an email and ask me for the contact information for Andrew Chappelle over at the Naval Research Lab. But that isn't, we're not a transportation command.
But the Navy does have transportation needs, and it depends on the type of transportation. The fact also is that if you have transportation, you know, trucking or something on that order, we can connect you with the appropriate individuals to achieve, you know, to find those opportunities at other services as well.
Another question, it looked like concerning HubZone again. They asked, why would a company lose employees when they grow?
Okay, so in order to be a HubZone company, besides the company being in a HubZone, 35% of the employees need to live in a HubZone. It's when I've talked to HubZone companies, they've just indicated that it's just very, very difficult, especially when geographically how the SBA maps out the HubZones changes. So I
And a
might live
lot
in
of
a
times it's
HubZone
done
today. I might live in a HubZone today, but I now no longer live in a HubZone. There goes my 35%.
and they're not always the best neighborhoods. And so as the company becomes better to attract the you know the right amount of skill sets and that type of stuff, maintaining that 35% can be very difficult because people don't want to live there. That's part of it.
Brad, I feel like we're in Shark Tank where we have kind of different but similar thoughts on some of these questions.
Well, mine are always correct.
Okay, of course. Yes, Scott.
Another question, are airports considered transportation?
Well, Brad, I said I wasn't a transportation command.
No,
I'll let you answer that one.
an airport. No, well, it depends. You have to go take a look at the NAICS codes to see what's considered transportation and what's not. And I'm not gonna, I can't speculate on whether or not I've never dealt with an airport as far as transportation. Dealt with different airlines and shipping companies and maritime, that type of stuff. So I would direct you to the NAICS codes. Again, just Google it.
Oh, I see he put in an update. He said, I'm talking about base facilities.
Okay, so there are plenty of base facilities within the Navy. A lot of them have their own airports, so I'm not sure that they would need civilian airport space. But give me a call and we'll try and figure out exactly what your question is and see if we can get you to a better resource, because I'm certainly not a transportation person.
Can we work with the Navy to process your retired? Okay, let me go back. I'm sorry. Can we work with the Navy or a subcontractor to process or buy your retired computers or manage data destruction services?
That's going to be through the Administrative Contracting Office, which in most cases has been the Defense Contract Management Agency.
Are there supercomputing like Oak Ridge National Laboratory projects in the pipeline?
Not for O&R. If we needed to use Oak Ridge, we would reach out to Oak Ridge.
And that's also something that you can check with the naval. What is SPAWAR down there? Naval War
Well, no,
information.
actually, Brad, I work for Department of Energy, which
Yeah,
Oak Ridge is under, and
yeah.
actually had a very nice trip to Oak Ridge. They have a Work for Others program
Oh,
where the Department of Navy or any of the other agencies can work directly with the Department of Energy to use those resources.
Good to
Now,
know.
if you're a contractor and you're doing a project for, let's say, ONR, you can request to use government furnished property, which may be what you're asking about. And that can be Oak Ridge. Well, and most times though, government furnished property on an ONR project is Navy owned property.
We find
I like
happy
these
web.
questions.
What did you say, Ellen?
I said, I like these questions.
Oh. We find heavy websites rather poorly maintained relative to the rest of DoD, lots of broken links and stale past year information. For a small business, it kills us as we don't have time to endlessly search. Can you help elevate this as an issue within your commands, especially as it pertains to Seaport?
We push a lot for our program officers to maintain their science and technology websites. The problem is the government isn't heavily manned. And as I say that, I think about my own small business website. I need to get working on getting it updated. It's grossly out of date. I also need, as I'm getting used to my job, need to change the focus on some of the material that I have there to make sure that the information I'm providing is appropriate to business people. But it's really hard. All the websites, they tend to be serviced by a local community. And so you have your webmasters, and then you have your folks that need to be feeding their information into there to keep it up to date. Well, they may have lots of different responsibilities, and I know in my case, I'm not always getting around to do my appropriate updates. What I'm working on now is updating my long-range acquisition forecast. It hasn't been updated for several months now, and you need current information. And then externally, there's some things on there that, yes, I do check the links, but I also need to provide more information on events that I'll be at. There's just a whole lot of things to do. I know the ONR website was recently refreshed and the contractor essentially abandoned the job. So they need to hire someone new to help out. I mean, we have all the same problems that you guys have. And, we might be the US Navy, but componently we're small and it's just up to people to do the right thing and to keep these things updated. I would be very interested in hearing about your problems with Seaport. If you care to send me an email, and I'll call you back.
Does the veteran need to own 51% of a company in order to apply for R&D grants? I am a 10% owner of a company that is innovating around aerial firefighting technology.
Okay, so for the ONR broad agency announcement, none of that is set aside. It doesn't matter what your ownership is. If we are setting aside something, then your ownership tends to need to be more than 50% of that social economic category. Did I get that right, Brad?
Yep.
I try to put you on the spot. So, I mean, if you're doing science and technology, you don't need to have that 50+% ownership. You just need a great idea and the capability to carry out that idea. And I say that carefully because I get a lot of calls from folks that say, they have the next great mousetrap for the Navy. Well, that's great. We all have ideas, but you also have to have the capability to perform on that idea. And that's hard. Any more questions, Amber? I know we're right at 3 o'clock, but I'll continue on if that's possible. And again, I do offer up, send me an email if you have some questions. And it doesn't necessarily have to be about the Office of Naval Research. I'll try and get it redirected, and I'll rely on Brad to help me with that.
Can employees of a hub zone company have employees in different hub zones for the 35% mark?
Yeah, that's okay. That works. They just have to live in a hub zone, not all in the same hub zone. And I know Brady will correct me if I get something wrong, but I've looked that one up recently.
Can the DoD sole source to a SDVOSB?
Yes.
Yeah, Brad, isn't that, it has to do with the rule of two, where you don't have to?
Well,
Limit sole
you
source?
can sole source. Yes, you can sole source to an SDV. And then
But you,
within
you
certain
wouldn't do it,
thresholds.
right, but you also wouldn't do that if you have enough to do a competition.
Oh, that's exactly right. That's right. If you have competition, no.
So let's say you're an IT firm, and I use IT as an example because that's an area where there's just an awful lot of competition. So it would be very difficult to get a sole source because there's so much competition there within that area.
Yeah, the rule of two will always prevail.
Wendy, anything else out there in question land?
I am looking, they're asking for your address again. So I'll add that in the chat as well as
Okay,
your,
I can also give you an easier address, which is ellen.simonoff@navy.mil. The one that's posted in the slide deck is my official address, but the ellen.simonoff@navy.mil is a little bit shorter. Less chance of a typo.
okay, I just placed that in there.
Okay.
Bradley, we have a few people asking for your contact information as well.
Yeah, I just posted my email address as well.
Okay. And I am going to, I don't see any more questions in the chat. I will look in the Q&A.
You know, a glance of some of the Q&A pops up. There are a lot of resources out there from the federal and state governments to help small businesses. I don't know how effective they are, but I would certainly give that a try. And Brad and I can help direct you to some of those resources if you don't know where to start.
And I can't stress enough that small business professionals are your advocates. We are your voice within the different buying organizations. And so if you have not talked to a small business professional, I strongly urge you to do so.
Thank you. Thank you, Ellen and Bradley. I don't see any more questions that are pending.
Okay.
Let's see here. Okay, so I have had the current slide quick survey up for everyone. When this training concludes, a survey will appear. I just want to remind everyone that we kind of switched it around this year as far as our survey. Strongly disagree is first, and then strongly agree is last. Ellen and Bradley, I want to thank you so much for being here today and providing this information to our veteran-owned small business and the small business community so they can know more about the Office of Naval Research. And since there are no more questions, we're about 5 minutes over, I'm going to go ahead and end this meeting. And thank you everyone for attending and happy holidays.
Thank
Have a
you,
nice,
Wendy,
yes.
and thank you, attendees.
Yes, really appreciate it, especially the number. Very, very good. Thank you.